It's been about a year since Help Wanted 2 first came out, and practically out of nowhere, Steelwool released a content update for the game. And while the update isn't enormous in size, it's still pretty immense in its implications. Not only does it tease the upcoming game Secret of the Mimic, but it also gives insight for the story of and surrounding Security Breach. But I don't think it's necessarily in the way that it's been generally assumed. So sit back and consider subscribing, because I'm going to explain just what I think is going on with the Help Wanted 2 update, and what it means for our understanding of the lore of Five Nights at Freddy's. For those who haven't seen the contents of the update, or those who want a quick refresher on everything we get in there, upon booting up the game with the update, the Mystic Hippo animatronic gives clues that direct the player to find something in the distant past, aka Night 2 of the sister location levels. Once there, we can find a picture of Jackie, a Jack-in-the-Box animatronic that was sorta probably shown in the Secret of the Mimic teaser and definitely featured in the Secret of the Mimic demo. And if you input the code 1979 in the same pin pad, you would usually put 1983 in to get the puppet memory doll in the base game. Rather than handing the player the puppet, Glitchtrap gives the player a white tiger plush with glowing green and blue eyes. The plushie then appears in the main pizzeria near the stage, and we're given access to a mimic statue wearing the costume from Ruined Scooper Ending. Another hint directs the player to throw something at the statue, which then unlocks a new area of the pizzeria with a Jack-in-the-Box that plays the puppet's music box theme, which also appears in the Secret of the Mimic teaser. Once wound, the screen goes dark and we hear the voice line "Time to play," which, based on the Secret of the Mimic stuff we do know about, is pretty much definitely from Jackie. Then we're given a puzzle template and can complete the puzzle by finding pieces throughout the various minigames and in the pizzeria. When the puzzle is completed, it shows a different image depending on whether the Vanny mask is on or off, and creates a scene in the room of what's shown in the picture. If the mask is on, the picture of what looks to be a sort of gift shop entrance with what's potentially a factory in the background. While we can't go into the building when it appears, there's a sort of mailbox looking thing out front that gives the code 4625. If the mask is off, the image is of a van, which in the environment opens to reveal the MXES machine from Ruin and a pin pad. By putting the code into the pin pad, you can trigger the appearance of MXES from the machine before it gets pulled back in, the van doors close, and the vehicle drives away. And upon returning to the stage area with the mask on, a new statue of Jackie in her music box is available to view. There are quite a few reasons to take note of each part of this update even separately, but they generally fall into two categories, those being implications for the upcoming lore of the games, and how the past lore of the books relates to the story up to this point. The most obvious of these is the second category. After all, just like the Mimic's appearance in the Ruin DLC was an instance of a major character from the Tales from the Pizzaplex books showing up in the games, the tiger plush bears a striking resemblance to an animatronic called Tiger Rock, a white tiger animatronic with green and blue eyes, and the titular character of one of the Tales from the Pizzaplex stories. For those who haven't read the story, Tiger Rock is an animatronic in a virtual reality simulation of a future version of the Security Breach Pizzaplex. When a boy named Kai enters the simulation, Tiger Rock pretends to be friendly but then makes escalating attempts to remove Kai's limbs. Kai tries to escape, but even when he returns to what he thinks is the real world, animals and objects keep appearing with one green eye and one blue eye, and accidents keep happening that almost lead to him losing a limb. Upon realizing that he was still in the simulation, he's able to break himself out of it and go home. Then there's this whole weird sequence where Kai goes to bed and then supposedly wakes up, but Tiger Rock comes through the window and rips his arms off, and then the story ends. I'm 99% sure that was a post-traumatic dream sequence, but who knows. Anyway, what's important about this story is how it relates to the Mimic story arc in Tales, specifically because Tiger Rock essentially is a virtual manifestation of the Mimic, and the culmination of a series of events that started with the Mimic endoskeleton and program being created by a man named Edwin Murray for his son David, who owned a white tiger plushie. The Mimic copied David in a lot of ways, including pretending to hold its own plushie, and continued to imitate him after the boy died. Edwin couldn't handle it, and in a fit of rage, attacked the Mimic. Since emotions in Five Nights at Freddy's have a tendency to stick around where they shouldn't and imbue themselves into machines they're felt around, and because it had observed violence from Edwin, the Mimic's imitations became a lot more deadly. Decades later, construction started on the Pizzaplex, and the Mimic endoskeleton, for whatever reason, was brought to the site along with the animatronics that were supposed to be there. One of the workers decided that they might as well use the endo to do some of the heavy lifting of cleaning up the pizzeria simulator location that was used as the build site for them, so he programmed the Mimic to remove the limbs and heads of the other endos in the building that weren't supposed to be there and make a pile out of them. Issue is, it classified humans as endoskeletons, which, as you can probably assume, did not end well. The construction crew sealed it inside the pizzeria simulator location, but later a bunch of teenagers snuck in and were all killed by the Mimic, except for a girl who managed to trap it in a spring lock suit and flip its deactivation switch before finding a way to escape the building. Later, when the Pizzaplex was built, the chairman of the board for Fazbear Entertainment, Mr. Burroughs, had the bright idea to use an AI storyteller to control stories at the Pizzaplex, and it was decided that it would be housed in a tree-like structure for symbolic purposes and decide on its own appearance. Edwin, who was a member of the board thanks to his company having been bought out by Fazbear Entertainment prior to the Mimic's creation, was already not a fan of AI being used for this, but was especially horrified when he found out the appearance the program had chosen for itself was a white tiger. He asked the chairman where he got got the program, and Mr. Bros just brushed him off and said it was some template software that rearranged stories into new scenarios for games. When the storyteller was brought online, it immediately started amping up the negative aspects of the animatronics' personalities and making them more aggressive. Determined to get to the bottom of things, Edwin snuck into the storyteller's tree and found the blue and green-eyed tiger head, and through the computers that the program it was using was called Mimic 1. While there are some other things that happen across the stories, it's pretty easy to see why Glitchtrap handing us a white tiger plush with blue and green glowing eyes is significant. That being said, there's actually a different glowing plushie that I think is important to mention, and that's the limited edition glow-in-the-dark Ghost ID or Ghosty plushie. This plushie is, in my personal opinion, significantly more huggable and even just nicer to look at if you'd rather display than hug, as she does not stare into your soul like the wall-eyed gremlin that is the Tiger Rock plush. If you'd like a ghosty of your own, she's only available until this Thursday at 9 AM Eastern Time at the link in the description and pinned comment, and then she's gone forever. No round 2, no pulling a William and coming back, that's it. And hey, if you buy the plushie, you'll not only get a little ghost friend, but if the plushie reaches over 200 sold, I'll play Pizzeria Simulator for the first time live on stream, despite how, ironically given my job, I don't do well with jump scares. I've been told watching me suffer is entertaining, so I'm willing to do it if you guys help this plush get over the bar to get made in the first place. Thank you to everyone for the support so far, and going forward through this plush and otherwise. Anyway, given we've got the tiger plush in the games, it's pretty clear that more elements of the Mimic's backstory in the Tales books are becoming relevant to the games. Especially since in the recent charity stream put on by Daco, we can see that the updated demo for the upcoming 5 Laps at Freddy's game features a billboard for a Murray company selling vacuum cleaners, which not only seems to be the basis for Mr. Hugs in Pizzeria Simulator, but is also exactly what Edwin Murray's company made in Tales before he sold his company to Fazbear Entertainment. Since 5 Laps at Freddy's was previously used to seemingly confirm the identity of William Afton as Midnight Motorist's Mustard Man, and there wouldn't be much point in giving us the blue and green-eyed white tiger to unlock the Mimic standee if it wasn't relevant to the Mimic, it didn't take long for theorists to come to the conclusion that the appearances of these elements of the books meant that the events of the Tales books themselves were one-to-one part of the game timeline, confirming the theory known as Tales games that proposed exactly that. However, there are a few reasons I don't think that's quite what these pieces of evidence confirm, and before anyone breaks out the pitchforks, I do think it's entirely possible, if not highly likely, that most if not all of Tales games is accurate, so long as you're willing to write off the continuity differences between the two as errors. As I've mentioned on Twitter, I'd say I'm somewhere in the 90% range for being sold on Tales from the Pizzaplex being in the game timeline, as my issues with the theory are generally pretty small scale. The thing is, I think it's beyond the scope of the evidence we actually have to say that the appearance of Edwin's name and a plush that references Tiger Rock confirm that every event in Tales is an exact match with the events of the games. Confirmation implies that there isn't a shadow of doubt, or any other possible interpretation that could be made, and I don't think that's quite what we get from these pieces of evidence. For example, the yellow rabbit antenna being on the purple car from Midnight Motorist in 5 Laps at Freddy's is an addition to the car that we don't see in Midnight Motorist itself, but here creates a connection between a yellow rabbit and a purple car. As William Afton is known as the Yellow Rabbit in some timelines, wears a yellow rabbit suit in all of them, and canonically drives a purple car, by combining this new evidence with what we already know about Midnight Motorist, I think that this is enough to specifically confirm William Afton's connection to the Midnight Motorist car. However, I don't think it's enough to confirm the identities and meanings of every single Midnight Motorist theory associated with William being the Mustard Man, such as what Junior's is, who's the runaway, or what's up with the dirt pile in the woods. Its scope is limited solely to the car and its owner. This is how I view the Tales elements in the games as well. The billboard confirms the existence of Edwin Murray and his vacuum company, and the green and blue-eyed white tiger confirms that the Mimic has connections to that form, just like it did in the books. While it's perfectly fine to make inferences beyond this about what it could mean for the rest of the elements of the books, technically, this is all that is outright confirmed. Extrapolating beyond this is merely theory. After all, this series does have a track record of porting over characters or other elements from the books without bringing everything associated along for the ride. Henry Emily was a character first introduced in the Silver Eyes, which is confirmed to be a separate continuity from the games, but was brought to the games where he plays a similar yet distinct role as William Afton's former friend and business partner and the father of one of his victims. Henry being in the games confirmed the existence of Henry as well as his relationship with William and the spirit of the puppet via his inclusion. But it doesn't mean that everything else in the book is along for the ride. While Tales is a different series from the novel trilogy, and I do generally use Tales as a base for the game events myself, it is entirely possible that even though some elements have appeared in the games, Scott Cawthon and Steel Wool could still take things a different direction than their book counterparts in other areas. For example, take the Tiger Rock plush. While I do think it's absolutely meant to tie into Tiger Rock, if you look at the back of its model, it has a zipper up the back, which would be strange for a plushie to have, and its head has a similar general appearance and textures that look more like a mascot costume head. Given the Mimic endoskeleton has the ability to shift the locations of its parts specifically to fit into different mascot costumes, and the fact that getting this plush gives us a statue of the Mimic wearing a mascot costume, I feel like this is more meant to be a downsized mascot costume. The thing is, as far as I'm aware, there's no Tiger Rock suit in Tales. Sure, there's David's Tiger plushie and the Tiger Rock animatronic, but Tiger Rock was metallic in both his VR and real-world forms, and was a form designed by the Mimic. And I don't think it's very likely that Fazbear Entertainment would have turned David's plush into a mascot costume. While this could just be the Mimic blending things it knows into one form, I could also see the argument being made that this would mean the Mimic sourced its attachment to white tigers from a mascot costume rather than David's plush, or that in the games, it chose its appearance virtually to be the white tiger mascot costume rather than the metallic version, or that Tiger Rock was only ever the physical costume in the first place. Do I think it's particularly likely? No, but it is technically possible, so I don't feel comfortable calling Tales games confirmed, especially when it seems like the games could diverge from what Tales established in other areas. It's possible that things may not be identical, and I would rather be open to the possibility of things being different than I expected than say that anything is confirmed beyond the scope I feel as though it is. That being said, I will largely be referring back to Tales as the basis for the rest of my theories regarding this update and its implications, at least where the origin of the Mimic is concerned, as I do think that's largely what Steel Wool is going with, even if they were to make some changes in adapting the stories over. So with all of that out of the way, we can finally get to the first category I mentioned, what this update means for the stories of the upcoming games. There are a few areas this update touches on that I feel are important to go over, both in regards to Secret of the Mimic and where the future portions of the timeline may be going. For Secret of the Mimic, alongside the first public in-game appearance of Jackie, I think we've been given some additional insight into the setting of the game. Similar to how the update to the original Help Wanted teased the setting of Security Breach by showing the Pizzaplex under construction, I'd say it's likely this gift shop and factory looking thing is going to be our setting for Secret of the Mimic, with Jackie being one of the attractions kept there. That being said, from what I remember of playing the demo myself, Jackie was in some sort of storage room looking thing connected to some office spaces, so she's likely not an active attraction. And speaking of attractions, the stained glass window has been pointed out by others to feature what looks to be Bonnie, and who I'm assuming is Freddy given Bonnie's blue instead of yellow, and the lack of the purple top hat Freddy would have if he was Fredbear. With Secret of the Mimic being set in a time before the launch of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, it's interesting to see them included so front and center. Freddy's didn't open until 1983, and from the initial Secret of the Mimic teaser video, as well as the 4-digit code we need to start the update quest line, we can infer that Secret of the Mimic takes place 4 years prior in 1979. So why would these two be featured in this way? Well, I think I have an idea. After all, just because they didn't have their own restaurant doesn't necessarily mean the characters themselves didn't exist at all. Why start a brand with brand new characters when you already have successful ones unless the characters aren't technically new? We see in FNAF 4 that there was a Fredbear and Friends TV show that featured the main for Freddy's animatronics in addition to Fredbear, so I think this could imply that even before the launch of Freddy's, the characters that would eventually star there may have existed for a while, and it could have been their popularity that led to the decision to create the spin-off Freddy Fazbear's Pizza from Fredbear's Family Diner. This would also explain why Freddy's was able to be so successful in such a short period of time between its opening and the missing children incident 2 years later. It didn't have to grow that entire fan base over just those 2 years, it was building off of one that it already had. The caravan wagon in the lower half of the window is interesting to me as well, particularly given the sun and moon imagery. While there is a sun and moon in the top portion of the window as well, the wagon has a sun pattern on it and a moon directly on top, which is something to note considering the theories that have gone around about sun and moon being characters that originated from these earlier portions of the timeline. I think this could be an indication of that, though I'm not sure what the wagon itself would be referring to in this case. If any of you guys have any ideas, feel free to drop them in the comments. Other than that, the last thing I want to talk about specifically in regards to Secret of the Mimic is the building's logo, which matches the one on the puzzle labeled MCM. With how there are no M's or C's to be found anywhere in the name Fazbear Entertainment, and the 5 Laps at Freddy's billboard labels Edwin's company as Murray Co., which would account for at least one M and the C, this is likely what became of Edwin's factory after he sold his company and dipped after accidentally making a murder machine. I could see this being a situation comparable to how Apton Robotics created the Funtime animatronics for Fazbear, with Murray Co-Manufacturing or something being the technical company just operating under Fazbear Entertainment's control as they would be the parent company. Maybe we'll be playing as Edwin returning to the factory where he left the Mimic, only to find that they've built this all up and shoved the Mimic into the Jackie animatronic or something. Or maybe it'll be some other thing that we just can't predict because we don't have all the information. Either way, these are the best guesses I have for Secret of the Mimic based on this teaser. But we've got a few other things going on related to the modern era of the story as well. For example, just like we received the memory plushies of William's victims in the base game from Glitchtrap, it's Glitchtrap who we received Tiger Rock from in this update. This could just be Steel Wool reusing the same asset and animations as the base game, since it would be more straightforward than modeling something else, but I think this adds further evidence to a theory I suggested in my original Help Wanted 2 video. In that video, I pointed out that some of the cut voice lines in the files of Help Wanted 2 mentioned that it is connected to the past through its memories, and that a small piece of his code remains. Given the memory plushies are of all the main 5 animatronics plus the puppet, and the distinction between it and his in the lines, I suggested that Glitchtrap as an entity was the it, and was made up of two components, represented by the two items you need to defeat Glitchtrap in Princess Quest III. The first component would be the Mimic 1 program, an AI with connections to fabric mascot costumes that was used in VR games, represented by the Vanny mask. The second would be the code, contributed by William Afton and his memories that only a small piece remains of, represented by the green rabbit plush. This would explain the distinction between it and his, how Glitchtrap would have memories of not just the missing children incident victims, but also Charlie, which the Mimic almost definitely wouldn't have been able to see unless it was somehow literally the puppet, and why the Glitchtrap virus would take on a unique rabbit appearance when the Mimic's preference is for white tigers. As such, I think Glitchtrap handing the player the white tiger is representative of the Mimic portion of Glitchtrap. Even if you were to collect all of William's memories and help Vanny destroy the William part of Glitchtrap's code, the Mimic part would remain, and would be why the Mimic is in control during Ruin. And on the topic of Ruin, the final thing I wanted to discuss is the ending of the update, where we see a van containing the MXES machine drive away, with how one ending of Help Wanted 2 leads directly into Ruin, but it also seems like both endings happen, implying some events may have happened after we give Cassie the Vanny mask. My guess is this scene is meant to either show that after the events of Ruin, someone came and took MXES after the Mimic's escape from where MXES had it sealed, or that we're seeing the past, with MXES being created by MCM, explaining why the machine looks so old and worn, and that it was transported from there to the Pizzaplex when the Mimic ended up there. Or maybe some combination of the two, I wouldn't know. But I do think this means that we may end up seeing MXES in a later game. What game that'll be remains to be seen, but with that, I'm excited to see where the story goes, and I hope you all enjoyed the video. Don't forget to order the Ghosty plush before you lose your chance, don't get stabbed, and have a nice day.